Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
We have a lot to be grateful for today. Specifically the miraculous return of the hostages, some of them, and we thank Hashem for that. And it is our heartfelt plea to Avinu Shebashamayim that the rest of the hostages should come home safely, whole, immediately.
Amen.
Okay, so we're at a very, very special place in the Chumash where things get very interesting. And we're going to talk about the state of Adam and Chava before the Chet. And then we're going to talk about the drama of we're going to introduce the snake and talk about the drama of the tree, all the trees. Anyway, so let's look at some of the psukim. Well, the next piece is a short piece, and then Bezrat Hashem, the piece after that is a little bit more involved, and we're going to have to study the psukim a little bit more in depth in order to appreciate the Alshech HaKadosh at that point, because we need to get the story down the way the psukim describe it, and we have to point out the features of the psukim. So I'm going to try to speak up. Is this good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so Perek Gimel, Pasuk Aleph. Oh, I'm sorry, right beforehand, the last Pasuk in Perek Bet, Chaf He. So we just said, right, that Adam HaRishon declared that how pleased he was upon receiving Chava, how wonderful it is, and then it says, Vayihiyu Shnehem, and they both were Arumim, they were naked. Ha'adam v'ishto, man and his wife. V'lo yitbashashu, and they were not ashamed. Okay. And both of them, who is the both of them here?
Adam
v'ishto. So why do I have to say, meaning the past two psukim, we were talking about Adam and Chava, and then we say, and both of them, presumably whomever we were referring to, and then the pasuk has to say Ha'adam v'ishto, man and his wife. What does that mean? Okay, let's see the Alshech HaKadosh. Okay. We are on Mem Aleph, page 41, the last line on the page. Vayu shnei marumim. They were both naked. Amar. The verse is saying, Ki mehidak kutam bakdusha. From the human species, Adam and Chava, being able to cleave to holiness, ubidvarim elyonim, and with sublime, elevated things, v'lo b'chelek chomer v'yetzahara, and they did not cleave or relate to the aspect of existence or the aspect of themselves, which was materiality and evil impulse. Lo yadu mahut ve'echut hara. They did not know neither the essence or the quality of evil. Ubechein, and therefore, lo hayu lahem evrei hamishkal be'einehem ki im ka'aznayim v'yadayim v'domehem. And therefore, their appendages, which were used to copulate, were not seen in their eyes like anything other than ears and hands and the like. There was nothing special about that faculty of the human experience, which is located in a particular appendage that was assigned with any particular. There was no difference between the function of that part of their body and the function of any other part of the body. Ki gam bihizdavgam, and even in their act of intimacy. Lo haya lahem hadavar lepoel. In actuality, that act was not something which is miguneh, lowly, yevoshu meroehem, that they should feel ashamed to be seen. I mean, there was no need to be self-conscious in an act of intimacy. Ki im ka'asher be'echol v'shato. It was just like eating and drinking. She'amru zal, that our sages, may their memory be a blessing, say, Ki shimshu b'fnei hanachash v'nit'avala. Okay, so I want to pause here for a second. We're introducing the snake here in the next pasuk, and the question is, what what was the snake's motivation for giving trouble to Adam and Chava? What was his motivation in the story? So the Alshech HaKadosh is noting that actually there's a statement of Chazal which is that has relevance here, and that is that the Nachash witnessed Adam and Chava in the act, and it aroused his lust, and he became obsessed with Chava, and his end game to all this was basically a seduction of Chava or making her available to him. Okay? So here, the Alshech HaKadosh wants to answer some of the questions that we posed on this pasuk with the idea, the statement of Chazal, that what instigated the whole drama with the snake was an act of innocent copulation that was witnessed by the snake. That's okay. So once again, Sha'amruzal, that our sages said, Ki Shimshu, that they engaged in the act, Bifnei Hanachash, in front of the snake, Vinit Avala, and therefore he lusted after her. V'al Kain, and therefore Lo Yitboshashu Biyotam Arumim, they were not ashamed of being naked. Ki lo yad'u, they didn't know. V'lo yavinu, and they did not understand. B'chinat hara, they couldn't even fathom that things need to be protected or private from being able to be corrupted. That there was such a force that there was a susceptibility and a vulnerability for things to be corrupted. Ki im rak tov. All they knew was the good. V'zeh ma'amar katuv, and that's what the pasuk means when it says vayihu, and they were, etc. What does that mean? V'hu besum lev, if you pay attention. Ki mi lo yeda, ki amro shnei marumim, hem adam v'yishto. Obviously, when the pasuk says shnehem, both of them were naked, obviously we're referring to Adam v'ishto. So why does the pasuk say both of them, and then it states again Adam v'ishto? V'im kain, and if so, lama yomar ha'adam v'ishto, ve'od, and further, shehaya lo lomar, it should have said ha'adam v'ha'isha. Why is it man and his wife? Kemo she'omer ha'adam. Okay. Ach lazeh nashit lev. To this we will turn our attention. Mehechan lamdu rabotenu. How did the rabbis know in Sanhedrin she'anachash ra'aotam, that the snake witnessed them asukim b'tashmish, that they were involved in the act of husband and wife? Achiyeh kavanat katuv, that must be the intent of the verse. Kihine, behold, derech ha'olam, the way of the world is ki biheyot arumim ish v'isha, when a man and woman are without clothing, gam shelo yitasku b'tashmish, even if they don't do anything overtly sexual, yitboshashu, you don't need to be involved in any particular context to be embarrassed from the fact that you're naked. Gam, additionally, kiyu levushim, let's say even they were clothed, v'yitasku b'mishgal, and they were engaged in the act, bifnei hazulat, in front of someone else, gam ken yitboshashu. So he's stating two things over here. Human nature is such that just being naked brings about shame, and even if you're not naked, being involved in a sexual act should naturally be shameful in front of witnesses. And yet, so why does the pasuk have to say, right? Okay, so one second. Uma gam ata, and just like now, at this point in the story, be'yotam arumim, they were naked. V'gam asukim b'mishkal, and they were also involved in the act. Bifnei zulatam, in front of somebody other than themselves. V'zehu amro, and that's what the verse is trying to communicate when it says, Ki hine hayu shneim arumim, they were both naked. V'gam asukim b'mishkal. Not that they were just naked, but they were naked and they were involved in the act. V'zehu amro, and that's what the verse means when it says, ha'adam v'ishto, shehu be'inyan heyoto hishto. It says specifically ha'adam and his wife to hint to you that they were engaged as husband and wife. Shehu ishut tashmish, which is the act of husband and wife. V'lo yitbaishashu, and they were not ashamed. Im heyot hanachash bifneihem, that the snake was in front of them. Shehaya az bal deya ukitiferet adam. This is a very mysterious statement here, and the Alshech, maybe he will elaborate in the subsequent pieces, but he says here that though the Nachash was in front of them, and he was then, Shahaya az, Baal Deya, he was capable also of Dat, Ukitiferet Adam, and somehow he too manifested or projected the splendor of man. that there was something unique about the Nachash, that he related to Adam to the point where he could lust after Chava, or he could vicariously put himself into, fantasize upon witnessing Adam and Chava.
Can I just interject here? You're saying two things, that it's human nature to be embarrassed if you're naked, it's human nature to be embarrassed if you're seen.
Right.
But these human natures that you're talking about didn't exist at Chava and Adam and Chava's stage, at that stage.
Yes.
So you can't
He's
blame
saying
them.
both. He's not blaming them. He's not blaming them here. He's explaining grammatically what the verse is trying to communicate. The verse says, okay?
I come here and I still can't hear him.
Maybe there's something that needs to be unblocked.
What?
Perhaps there's a blockage.
No, I have a problem. I was a Totchal and I don't hear very well.
Okay, I'm going to try to project better.
You're whispering.
I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry, just speak louder.
You heard that. Okay, all right, anyway, so, okay, the verse says there are three components here we're trying to make sense of, okay? Okay, the first part,
That's
point...
better.
Excellent. Okay, so the first point is that they were naked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, okay. The second part is that they were husband and wife.
Mm-hmm.
And the third part is that they were not ashamed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So now, he's asking, if you're telling me that they were not ashamed because though they were naked, that would have been enough. If you were told me that they were ashamed because they were not ashamed even though they were seen, that would have been enough. Why is the pasuk trying to tell me these 2 points? Right? That's the question. The question is, right? Meaning the pasuk is telling me the Chazal is telling me that what's going on in this pasuk is that the snake is witnessing them in the act.
He's
Okay?
trying to explain the words of why they were not ashamed.
Right. So he's saying
it's obvious that they would not be ashamed because they were not built to be ashamed.
Right. So he's saying that the fact that they were naked, right, as Adam as man and wife, really means that they were engaged in the act, and that they were not ashamed means they were not ashamed of the Nachash witnessing. And that's how the Chazal saw the pasuk to tell this story.
Oh, I see. It's not
Okay.
that they weren't ashamed of being naked or
Right.
in the act.
Those are questions he poses to reread the pasuk, that each element is referring to a specific thing. That's okay.
So can you just say
Yeah,
that?
you know, oftentimes when you ask me, it's actually in the middle before he finishes the line. So I'm going to
so
go back
eager.
a little bit.
Okay, go.
Okay? So one more time. Let me just find... okay, vizeh. Vizehu amra. And this is when the verse says, Ki hine hayu shneim arumim. They were both naked. What does that mean? That they were not just naked, v'gam asukim b'mishkal. They were also being intimate. Okay, so just v'shnei marum, it doesn't just mean naked. It means that they were being intimate. V'zeu amro ha'adam v'ishto, and that's why the verse says, even though it says both of them, it says again, man and his wife, and not man and woman, to tell you that they were naked, meaning they were engaged in the act of man and wife. Shehu binyan bi'inyan, regarding the issue, heyota ishto, because she was his wife, shehu ishut tashmish. This is a reference to the act of husband and wife being together. V'lo yitboshashu, and they were not ashamed. What does that mean? Im heyot hanachash b'fneihem. That means that there was somebody witnessing the snake. Shahaya az, and this is a little bit mysterious at this point, but he says that you should know that the nachash had a different quality than all the other creatures. Shahaya az, then he was bal de'ah. He had da'at. Ukitiferet adam, and he was like the splendor of man. There was something akin there was something special about the snake that he shared that he could relate to the inherent superior quality invested in Adam. And therefore, that's what allowed him to interject himself, at least in his fantasies, in the relationship of Adam and Chava. Umizeh, and from this act, the fact that he witnessed this, Yatzal Rabbeinu Zal, Umizeh, from the structure, I guess, of the psukim, right? Our sages were able to extract ki ra'au tam asukim b'tashmish v'nitava leisha. That's how they understood that the snake had seen them engaging in that behavior, and he lusted after the woman. Ki darshu yitur, because they learned out homiletically from the addition in the pasuk when the verse says ha'adam v'ishto. It said shnehem. Both of them. It doesn't have to say who do we mean? Man and his
I
wife.
understand something. I'm a simple
Yeah.
man. How could a snake lust after a woman?
What is a snake?
So a snake is an animal.
That's not what we're referring to here. We don't mean that. In fact, according to all
It
the...
says, Nachash.
Right. Apparently, what's interesting is, you have to think about it like this. What we call...
I don't think about anything.
You're right. You're right. I don't want to challenge you. Okay.
Challenge you. I like
But
the
I would
challenge.
I would suggest that you look at it like this. That which we call snake is a borrowed name from something much more primordial that had a role in the drama of Gan Eden.
What is it?
It is something much more akin to a human being.
What is it?
We're going to say in the next piece.
Oh, good.
Because we have it, because the next piece starts with the pasuk where it actually introduces him. The only reason why we're talking about him now is because we used the midrash to understand the pasuk before, but the pasuk hasn't introduced him yet. The pasuk's going to say that the nachash was cleverer than all the animals, and the Alshech will discuss exactly what we're talking about.
But the snake was male, right?
Yes,
Why didn't he lust after Adam?
I don't understand.
Why did he lust after Chava? Why did he lust after Adam?
We'll see when the story actually starts, but that's
we'll
ahead.
see.
Okay.
We see.
Okay. He actually asks. This is very important to understand the drama. Why the Nachash came to Chava and not to Adam? What would have happened if he just approached Adam? But that's for next time.
Maybe he was homosexual.
Okay, so that's how the rabbis were able to understand from the peculiarities of the pasuk that it restates that both of them, man and his wife, and it uses the specific terminology of his wife. We understand what's going on here, right? And also the juxtaposition, v'gam smichut v'nachash haya. The next verse, which is going to say, and the snake was, right? The next verse introduces the snake. The juxtaposition of this verse telling this story with the snake is what the rabbis were able to see in this.
So Adam did Kiddushin?
What?
Adam did Kiddushin?
It's interesting. There are midrashim like that, but I don't believe.
You call him his wife. You can't be a wife without Kiddushin.
That's not what the Rambam says in Hilchot Ishut. He says Kiddushin is only shayach to Yisrael after Matan Torah. It was not. It was a non-reality beforehand. That's the Rambam in the beginning of Hilchot Ishus. Al Kain, therefore, mehayitur, from all these added additions in the pasuk, darshu hatashmish, they were able to learn out the story of Adam and Rishon and Chava's copulation, umeasmichut, and from the juxtaposition, darshu, they learned relevance in terms of the nachash, and it avala, that he lusted after her, v'al kain, and therefore, halach achareh, he proceeded to go after her.
It's interesting that we learned in Noach that the Alshech says that for every good, positive energy, there has to be a counterbalance, negative one. So we have Adam created, and by necessity, we have to have a balancing negative equivalent to balance him out. And it's fascinating that the Nachash has the same similar dat and similar light of Adam in the negative side. And it's interesting. What's interesting for me is that why Hashem deemed it necessary to create a counterbalance, negative counterbalance to Adam, and not Chava.
Is the Yetzer Hara, are there two Yetzirei Hara? Is there a female Yetzer Hara and a male Yetzer Hara?
Right.
That's what you're asking.
Yes.
Why is it one Yetzer Hara that manifests both through male and female and not, right?
And I'm asking that because I'm preempting the question you asked before, which is, why didn't the Nachash go to Adam? Because he wouldn't have got anywhere.
Well, the Eitz Hadat is incorporated. If you think about, let's look at the Hishtal Shalut, the emanation of how man and woman came into being, right? Creation from its earliest germ was already based on the idea of union of a cosmic masculine force and a feminine force. That dimension was introduced the second that there was a creation, because it was formatted to receive that kind of tselem, and God already takes on the masculine role, where the creation takes on vis-a-vis the feminine role. And you can go through every single day of creation and note where the masculine and feminine are being represented and how there's a subsequent evolution or another layer of being that hangs on them that becomes vessels, how they slowly emanate to the bottom line. The bottom line is the tikkun of masculine and feminine are in the male and female human species. So that man and woman are a representation of the cosmic masculine and feminine, and in their field where they work it out, that's supposed to be the yichud upstairs of those great forces. Okay? So now, we said that in the creation of Adam and Chava, first there was thought, and then speech, and then action.
Right.
On the level of thought, they existed independently because indeed, if there are manifestations, masculine and feminine were already separate. But they still need to be culled together in one species.
Right.
So then they're called Adam, so that in the creation level of speech that God has, He unifies them with a unified now they are all two parts of one whole, but they have to be able to connect. And then in the level of deed, right, in the level of fashioning them with all their physical, all the way to their physical being, there's a level of unity that we discussed, okay? Now, what's the one level missing, or the one element missing from what we know as modern man and woman? The cherry on top that makes everything really the full human experience of what it means to be a man and a woman today.
The children?
No, the introduction of the Eitz Hadas.
You what?
The introduction of the Eitz Hadat. So, man and woman before the Eitz Hadat do not have a Yetzer Hara.
Right.
But yet the Nachash seems to behave as if what we would identify as our behavior with the Yetzer Hara. Meaning, what's bugging the Nachash?
No, the Nachash was Yetzer Hara Chitzoni.
Yes, but I'm pointing out that he's behaving not like he is just a Yetzer Hara, but he's plagued and haunted by his own Yetzer Hara. Meaning we're contrasting the Nachash with Adam, and we're saying Adam had a before and after.
Right.
Adam was totally, he couldn't conceive of bad. And here the Nachash is already being driven by his own lusts.
Yes.
What's going on here? What is he being plagued by? Why did, okay, that's how I would ask what you're...
Is that what Alshech is saying?
No, he hasn't touched this yet. We haven't talked about any of this. But when I heard your question, that's really what I think. That's my... You're talking about, it's not just that he was like Ha'adam, but think of the complexity. There's some sort of phenomenon going on here.
He was Adam with the Yetzer Hara.
Right,
in
so
him.
what... Okay. So before we take this any further, the reason... Why did I... You were asking, what I wanted to say is that right now we're talking in this story, I'm pointing out that we're talking about Adam and Chava before they have a Yetzer Hara inside of them.
Right.
Right. And you said that this Nachash seems to be behaving somehow akin, he's like the flip side, the dark side of the Adam. And I'm saying even more than that, there's even a more complex thing going on here. He's almost like the Adam after the eating from the Eitz Hadas. Meaning, what's Adam supposed to understand from meeting confronting this? What was the purpose of the Nachash? Why was the Nachash put in Gan Eden? Why was that a good idea from God's point of view to put this chaotic element, right? And the truth is, what I wanted to say was that ultimately, the way they change after this is that if you follow the model of thought, speech, and deed, they're already fully formed as man and woman when they receive the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara is the same. So it might manifest differently in men and women, but it's the same Yetzer Hara. There's no male Yetzer Hara and female Yetzer Hara. It didn't travel with them initially. There wasn't Yetzer Hara on the level of cosmic masculine and feminine that emanated all the way down. It was the last outer thing, the most non-essential thing that becomes our experience today. That's after. So it's the same Yetzer Hara. I was just pointing that out, that it's like a reverse, it's like a funnel, if you think about it. Meaning that, whatever. Okay, anyway, I guess we'll call it a day in the Alshech HaKadosh for now, because the next piece, we have to explore, we have to take time to read the psukim and then at least start the questions before I don't want to lose a train of thought if we can avoid it.
But can we just linger just a little bit?
Let's linger.
What do you think? What do you think is the God created this perfect unity of masculine and femininity. It comes into Adam and Chava. And they are together. They actually
masculine and feminine is not perfect. I'm sorry. I just have to interject because this might change your question. There are critical moments during the first week where there were breakdowns in masculine and feminine, which ultimately result in the fault lines in Adam and Chava that they have to fix.
Oh, please tell me about that. because
Okay, the most famous one that every child who goes to Cheder knows is the moon having a problem with the sun.
Right.
Those
That-
problems?
The moon has problems sharing space, sharing a role with the sun.
The moon has problems?
That's, the famous midrash about Shtei
The
Ham.
moon can't have problems, it's an inanimate object.
Then why do they sing about the blue moon?
I have no. Blue moon? It's a song.
Doesn't blue mean that it's sad?
It's a song.
It was sympathizing with me
It's
standing
a
all
song,
alone.
It's a song.
So there are certain key moments where we discuss a breakdown in Maaseh Bereshit. We're going to come back to this when God curses the Adamah because of Adam. So why is the earth getting cursed? Because until now, that which it did on the third day was seen as cute, and now it was seen as problematic.
As soon as cute?
Yeah, meaning when God said, hey, I want this, and the earth kind of deviated and did something else, so there were aspects that Hashem was very happy about, right? We said, Yismach Hashem b'ma'asav, that the Zra'im made a kal v'chomer me'atzman, right? All that stuff. So he's like, great, this is so nice, it's alive, it's, right? But then, because the fact that it's able to deviate resulted in Adam sinning, he goes back and he says, okay, that was a breakdown. So there are critical moments in Maaseh Bereshit which are seen. Like there's a whole sugya in Kabbalah called the Miyut Halvana. The fact that the moon has a waning. That the Miyut Halvana is a whole sugya which talks about the darkness, the limitation of the feminine aspect in this world to truly receive and do and fulfill its mission. That's one of the sad breakdowns of this world. That's what Kiddush Levana, the prayer at the end of Kiddush Levana, is all about.
Well, what's that got to do with Adam and Eve? I mean,
Because Adam and Eve is just a reflection. By the time they're receiving a creation, they're receiving all of cosmic, masculine and feminine, on the whole journey it went through the 6 days of creation. And all the breakdowns ultimately manifest them in the breakdown within masculine and feminine as manifest in man and woman, and they have to work that all out.
fair enough. But the question still exists that you have this masculine and feminine before deviation, right? Which is perfect before deviation. It creates cracks, okay.
Yeah.
But at Adam and Chava, it's still retaining that element of perfection. What is the motivation of God to bring in the Nachash at this stage? What is the value there?
The whole point of the Nachash is to make a wedge between Adam and Chava. You'll see. It's all about this. It's all about what we're talking about.
So God actively wants to create a wedge?
No. You're asking. Okay. So listen. So two points. Okay, 2 brief points. Well, the first point is we didn't even begin to look at the story inside, and you're asking really, really important questions about how we would digest the story. So the second point is, in light of that, even though you have questions, even though we haven't seen, you have questions, I will give you a short introduction. This is how I think about. This is what we have to understand, in the words of the Ramchal. Okay, briefly, the setup is as follows: God is good. Therefore, God wants to bestow good. God made a creation in order to bestow good. His highest good is himself. In order for us to receive good, we have to earn it. That's the Ramchal. The Ramchal says like this: God could have just given it to you, and however, you would have found that to be the bread of shame. You would have found that shameful. And therefore, the highest good is when you feel that it's an extension of yourself, a result of what you earned, and the fact that it is truly you. And therefore, God, in granting you the good, he makes a setup that you have to earn it. Therefore, in order to earn it, you need to have free will. Free will means that you're given a choice to choose the good, and therefore it's because of your choice that you receive good. The only way to have free will is to have a counter to the good, together with the very real pull, right? You have to have tension between good and bad in order to choose. Otherwise, what's the choice? Therefore, the Yetzer Hara was created in order to give you a choice to reject so that you could earn good. So according to the Ramchal, the whole point of the Yetzer Hara is in order that you should earn schar. Part of the highest good means that you need to reject the Yetzer Hara. So for example, in the Zohar HaKadosh, it offers a mashal to think of the Yetzer Hara like this. Suppose there was a king, and the king had a beloved son, and he wanted that son should be worthy of inheriting the kingdom. And he had a beloved minister, vizier, helper, servant, a beautiful, amazing woman. And she is totally devoted to the king and the success of the inheritance of the prince. And the king says, listen, in order for my son to be worthy, or for me to know that he is worthy, I need him to resist the wily seduction of a woman. And I'm going to ask you to try to seduce him. Now, the point of this seduction is that he should resist. The role of this particular beloved advisor is in order to provide that, but she herself, what is she committed to? She's loyal to the king and loyal to the prince, and she doesn't even want him to fail. It's just that that's her role. Her role is there so that he should reject her. So the Zohar says that in a perfect world, that's how you have to see what the Yetzer Hara was intended to be. Now, this act, this story, the drama that we're going to read about in Gan Eden didn't just result in Yetzer Hara within us, but the fact the Yetzer Hara also went rogue. And that's a whole other element. That's meaning the way we see the world is not, meaning that the fallout also was in terms of the power. We emboldened the power of evil to be a runaway train. That doesn't mean, chas v'shalom, that anything is outside the control of God. We're not Gnostics or Christians, chas v'shalom, that we believe that there's a rogue element in creation that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no control over. It's just that he allowed, in his infinite wisdom, now if you look at it, right, there's a whole approach to seeing the Yetzer Hara at the end of days as actually also standing, receiving punishment. Meaning the idea that, like the Baal Shem Tov says, it's bad enough, it would have been great if that advisor to the king just tried to seduce us. Meaning the role of the Yetzer Hara is just to dangle in front of us an alternative to the good. Right. But the Yetzer Hara, in our experience, is not satisfied with that and actually confuses us even of what is good and what is bad. It doesn't just dangle in front of us the bad and say, reject this. It says, this is the good you want, maybe, and that, right? So there's what to talk about, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. But if you want to think about maybe the purest way you could think of a positive, constructive role for why God put a Yetzer Hara in the world, it was ultimately to facilitate the earning of the ultimate good. Okay? Okay. We'll pick up.
We're not assigning any blame at this stage to Adam and Chava.
No, we didn't even talk about if they did it.
No, but
it's so funny to talk about
we're
this
reading
now,
into it, right?
What? Meaning what happened? No. 1 second. Did they do anything wrong? No.
At this stage.
Could they have done anything different? No. And yet, the rabbis are saying, this is what happened. Now, if you look at what happened, you can explore and you can learn a lot of things. So the rabbis are saying, they didn't know, it wasn't their fault, they're doing what they were supposed to do. Happens to be that the Nachash was there, and the Nachash was instigated. Now, there's two levels here. There's the level of what's going on with the Nachash, and why did God allow this whole thing to happen?
Right.
But we're not assigning blame or anything. We're just telling you what happened.
But you're saying that with hindsight, sorry, I had to linger on this.
We got to blame somebody.
No,
whose fault is it?
No, not that. But with hindsight, are you saying,
guilty?
Are you saying that with knowledge that Hava and Adam and Chava would have done things differently had they had that knowledge?
No, because I would have. That was my point before. The only way the Nachash could feel this way is because he's already self-aware. Meaning everything.
He's self-aware and they're not.
Everything that makes them pure. It's only, meaning that's the contrast. The reason why they are the way they are and the Nachash is the way he is because they're exact opposites here in the story. Meaning, Adam Arisha could never have been, it could never have been reversed. Adam Arisha could never have witnessed something and had fantasies because of that and be driven and lusted after something. He didn't have the Yetzer Hara for that.
But that's not a fair battle. How can you give...
Once again, you're getting ahead because we didn't even talk about the setup. It's not... You're already the foregone conclusion of the tragedy and lamenting and how could it be. We didn't talk about the story yet. All we said was, this is an event, and this immediately the rabbis are charting something that happened. And you're saying, and it's terrible that it happened, and it shouldn't have happened, it could have happened differently, but...
I'm just saying, let's look at this. We're looking at the setup now, so we can discuss the setup.
The setup is they had to be pure, right?
Yeah, they were pure.
The only way to be pure, the result of being pure, is this kind of behavior.
Right.
They couldn't have. If they would have acted different, they had to have been aware of Ra.
I don't have a question of that.
And
but
yet,
my question is, why did God create the snake at a higher level of consciousness than Adam and
He
Eve.
wasn't a higher level of consciousness.
Self-awareness is a higher level of
Why don't
consciousness.
you ask
Are you
him?
sure?
Self-awareness,
Why don't you ask him?
who?
God.
Self-awareness
Can
has
you-
to be
you're
a higher
there's
level
a
of consciousness.
I think what you're asking a deeper question. You're saying, how can one have a higher self-awareness and also innocence of evil? That's the question. I mean, remember, we want to be pure and yet be responsible. How
Right.
can you be able, the goal of a human being is to be both pure and untainted and yet aware of evil so that you can be tzanua.
protect, you can
Yeah,
protect.
you can have shmirah. You
Right.
can, right? You have how can you, without understanding evil, how can you be tzanua?
I see.
And yet, at the same time, you don't want to be corrupted by the knowledge of
Right,
evil.
right.
So, we go through this kind of, I don't want to call it dialectic, but you start innocent. Children, it's beautiful. They cannot take responsibility for themselves. They are purely what they are, and they don't know how to mediate themselves. They don't have any
Right.
inhibitions,
Right.
and therefore they're pure. And yet, they're unaware of their surroundings, and they cannot mediate, they can't relate, and they can't make space for, meaning they can't modulate, right? But a child starts to create a persona, false sense of self, out of a need because they're taught at some point there's fear of, meaning there's something out there in the world that they have to mediate from, whether it's concern, safety, whatever it is. They have to start mediating their behavior, and then in socially you have concerns. You don't want this to happen. You have concerns. So you try to, how do we manage situations? We manage ourselves socially by constructing a persona, right? And that can start becoming a blockage of actual authentic interaction. So what we have to do is we learn how to make boundaries, and yet at the same time to be earnest. That's the Brit. That's really the whole idea of getting rid of the arla, to be vulnerable, right? You can't relate to reality on your own terms, right? But at the same time, to be able to only use shmirah, to only be appropriate, right? To be true to the covenant, to have integrity. That's what it means. Okay? So there was no other way. At this point, it's like infancy. It's you have to see humanity, consciousness, in infinity, and the fact that the Nachash is thinking, he's not reversed. He's only thinking about himself. He looks at the world. It's his oyster. It's his tava to eat. He can't limit himself. He sees things that has nothing to do with him, and he already interjects himself.
Right.
Right. That's not a higher level of awareness. That's an obsession. That's only an awareness of self. Okay. And I'm not. I don't think it addresses your questions. I'm just pointing out. Okay, yeah. Okay.
Okay,
We're
we'll leave it like
discussing-
that.
Okay.
Shkoyach.